Hello and welcome. Today, we're journeying into the shadows, to the places where history's whispers are loud. We're exploring the haunting world of abandoned asylums. These sprawling, decaying structures aren't just empty buildings. They're monuments to a forgotten era of mental health treatment, a time filled with both noble intentions and immense, unimaginable suffering. Join me as we unlock the doors to these silent giants and listen to the stories they have to tell. Our story begins in the 18th and 19th centuries, a time when society's understanding of mental illness was shrouded in fear and superstition. People suffering from mental health conditions were often seen as possessed, cursed, or morally corrupt. Families, unable to cope and facing social stigma, had few options. The madhouse, as it was often called, became the default solution, a place to lock away those who didn't fit into the neat boxes of society. Early institutions were often no better than prisons. Patients were chained to walls, confined to cramped, unsanitary cells, and subjected to so-called treatments that were more like punishments. The goal wasn't healing, it was containment. It was a bleak and brutal reality for countless individuals whose only crime was an illness they couldn't control. But then, a flicker of hope emerged. A movement for moral treatment swept across Europe and America in the mid-19th century. Visionaries like Dorothea Dix in the United States and Philippe Pinel in France argued for a radical new approach. They believed that patients deserved compassion, clean living conditions, and therapeutic activities. This philosophy gave birth to the Kirkbride Plan, an architectural style that would define the golden age of the asylum. These asylums were designed to be therapeutic in themselves. They were massive, magnificent structures with sprawling wings that allowed for maximum sunlight and fresh air. They were often set on vast, beautiful grounds with farms, gardens, and workshops. The idea was that a peaceful, structured environment, combined with meaningful work and recreation, could restore a troubled mind. For a time, it seemed like a utopia for the mentally ill was within reach. Hospitals like the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum in West Virginia or the Danvers State Hospital in Massachusetts were built with this incredible optimism. Were self-sufficient communities. Patients tended crops, raised livestock, and worked in laundries and kitchens. They had access to libraries, chapels, and theaters. The early years of these Kirkbride hospitals were a stark contrast to the horrors of the old men. Doctors and nurses were often dedicated, believing they were part of a revolutionary new way to care for the vulnerable. They kept detailed records, trying to understand their patients and find effective treatments. But this golden age was tragically short. The dream began to crumble under its own weight. These institutions were incredibly expensive to build and maintain. As the 20th century dawned, they became victims of their own perceived success. Overcrowding became a catastrophic problem. A hospital designed for 250 patients might find itself housing over 2,000. State funding failed to keep pace with the exploding patient populations. Staff-to-patient ratios plummeted, and the compassionate, individualized care that was the cornerstone of the moral treatment movement became impossible. The beautiful grounds became overgrown, and the once majestic halls fell into disrepair. The utopia was turning into a nightmare. With overcrowding and underfunding came the return of desperation. Doctors, overwhelmed and with few effective tools, turned to increasingly radical and invasive procedures. This was the era of lobotomies, insulin coma, therapy, and electroshock treatment. The prefrontal lobotomy, a procedure that involved severing connections in the brain's prefrontal cortex, was championed by doctors like Walter Freeman, who developed the ice pick lobotomy. It was a brutal, imprecise surgery that often left patients apathetic, emotionally blunted, or in a vegetative state. While some believed it calmed agitated patients, it did so at a terrible cost, destroying the very personality it was meant to save. Thousands upon thousands of these procedures were performed, often without patient consent, turning vibrant individuals into docile shells of their former selves. Life inside the overcrowded asylum became a daily struggle for survival. The lack of staff meant that basic needs were often neglected. Patients were left in soiled clothes, hygiene was poor, and violence between patients and, sometimes from overworked, frustrated staff was common. The therapeutic activities that were once central to the asylum's mission disappeared, replaced by long, empty hours of confinement. The very architecture designed for healing became a prison once more. The long corridors, meant to be filled with sunlight and hope, became echo chambers of despair, loneliness, and fear. The stories of abuse and neglect from this period are heartbreaking. Patients were not seen as people needing care, but as problems to be managed. The tide began to turn in the 1950s and 60s. Two major developments spelled the end for the large-scale asylum system. First was the development of psychotropic medications, particularly thorazine, the first effective antipsychotic drug. For the first time, the symptoms of severe mental illnesses like schizophrenia could be managed with medication, allowing many patients to live outside of an institutional setting. The second was the deinstitutionalization movement, a growing public awareness, fueled by exposes and a rising civil rights consciousness, led to a push to close these massive, inhumane institutions and move patients into community-based care centers. The idea was noble: to reintegrate patients into society and provide them with support in a more humane, less restrictive environment. However, the process of deinstitutionalization was deeply flawed. The asylums were closed, and thousands of patients were released. But the promised network of community mental health centers was never adequately funded. Many former patients were left with nowhere to go and no support system. They ended up homeless, in prisons, or cycling in and out of emergency rooms. It was a tragic failure that traded one set of problems for another. And the great asylums, once symbols of hope and then of horror, were simply abandoned. They were left to the elements, their doors locked, their secrets sealed within. Today, these abandoned asylums stand as haunting relics on the landscape. Their peeling paint, shattered windows, and decaying interiors are a powerful testament to a complex and often painful history. For urban explorers, photographers, and paranormal investigators, they are places of fascination and mystery. But as we look at these beautiful, crumbling ruins, it's crucial to remember that they were more than just buildings. They were homes and prisons for hundreds of thousands of real people. People who had names, families, hopes, and dreams. People who suffered immensely within these walls. Their stories are a vital part of our collective history. They remind us how far we've come in our understanding and treatment of mental illness, but they also serve as a stark warning. They show us what can happen when we allow fear and stigma to dictate how we care for the most vulnerable among us. They remind us that compassion, funding, and a commitment to individual dignity must be at the heart of any system of care. The echoes in these empty halls are not just ghosts of the past. They are lessons for our future. It's important to remember that if you or someone you know is struggling, there are resources available. Reaching out to a mental health professional or a crisis hotline can be a life-changing first step. You are not alone. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the heart of these forgotten places. Their stories are a heavy but necessary burden for us to carry. If you found this exploration meaningful, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more journeys into the hidden corners of history. Stay curious, stay compassionate. Thanks for watching.